the golden key to creativity, whether it be an artistic expression or innovation. What we want to look at is this concept here in Taoism, which we call WEI, which can be interpreted as non-doing or non-action. It can also be interpreted as effortless action, that is one with the ebb and flow of the elemental cycles of the natural world. Now, this ability to connect with inner and outer, harmonizing, which we've been talking about, is this feeling of oneness, which is found through deep awareness. Deep awareness is something where we put aside this overthinking, over-analytical, over-logical aspect of ourselves, and we allow more of the understanding to flow from within us. You've heard me say this many times. I believe that everything, all the answers are found within. When I reflect back on my experiences in communication, business dealings, live events, consulting, group communications, masterminds, and so forth, what I noticed is that there was a certain time where I found myself easily able to express in the ideal way. Putting together a marketing campaign, designing a product, servicing a client, and so forth. There were certain times where I really understood deeply this concept of Wu Wei. I felt I was living it. And there were times where it felt like I was not in that zone of understanding of what this really means. So one of the things that I had mentioned in one of my videos was in 2017, when I was in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, I had a realization where I evaluated my past and I looked at where were the times where I was the most joyous, the most effective, the most productive, the most one with my vision, and where were the times where I seemed to be disconnected, overly identified with mental chatter, creating unnecessary resistance within myself, which would then externalize as unnecessary resistance when I was dealing with others, or when I was working with my projects, or when I was doing anything for that matter. I found that it was when I was in a certain state of mind, which we call flow state of mind, where I would experience a higher degree of creativity. And I then made a commitment to myself that said that I would remain in that state of mind, recognizing that there are probably periods where I would experience more of being in the zone, deep flow. We call this autotelic, being one with. And there would be a majority of times where I'd be more lighthearted, and this would provide me a lot of benefit. So I went down this individualized pathway over the years, and I've been sharing different elements of my experience through these videos so that you can benefit from these kinds of experiences and understandings, and we've been weaving it into discussions from various authors and those that I felt had a very high command of understanding of mind. And what they revealed is this individualized pathway, this individualized inner journey that occurs. So it seems to me that we are traveling in the world within, and the travels of the world within is being expressed in this life that we live. And what we would call creative expression is the articulation of this inner journey. So then we go back to the understandings that we learned from mental alchemy, which is the ability to rearrange the mind and to consciously rearrange the mind and maintain a certain state of mind externalizes as a vision externalized, a dream brought forth, a creative expression such as an art or a communication piece and so forth. That is a result of the rearrangement of the mind, the inner dialogues, the inner interpretation, which we unravel through this individualized inner pathway. Now, if we look at life, we'll see it from you could say generally two perspectives, but it could be a combination of both. Someone might see it from the perspective of that which exists here in this outer world is all that exists, and I am impressed by it. And what is impressing me from this outer world is what I can work with so that I can creatively express. So we're taking bits of different experiences, thought process, belief systems, assumptions, inspirations that we seem to be stimulated from the outer world and form creative expression as a result of that. Napoleon Hill, in his book Think and Grow Rich, referred to this as synthetic imagination. There's a certain point in the journey where we discover what he calls creative imagination. And when we use the word creativity, as we've been discussing in our Neville Goddard-based discussions, we're discussing it more accurately put from revealing from what is already there, as in everything is created and complete, and we are selecting in our imagination something that we want to see brought forth, and we bring it forth. One of the things that you'll find is that as you continue on this inner evolution of yourself, which we've been discussing, is ordering the inner conversations, consciously using the mind to discover who you are, identify what do you really desire, commit to what you desire and bring it forth. As you continue this journey, what you'll also notice is that you seem to innovate. You come up with new ideas, new ways of looking at reality, and thus new creative expressions. And what you'll find is that others benefit from this. This is also the pathway of the entrepreneur. If you look at Airbnb, it's built on the foundation of other technologies that became available. Others created certain kinds of technology via code, and then other individuals saw that, which through their own internal journey, whether they realize it or not, had revealed the ability to connect those dots and bring forth innovation. Now, this is a natural way of being. I believe this to be a natural way of being. Infinite riches in the form of resources are all around. We've been talking about this. You've got different kinds of resources available in the entrepreneurial space. You've got different relationships. You've got different assets. You've got different technologies. You've got different processes, systems, social media platforms, tools available. They're all around. And by looking through your mental eye of imagination, the infinite possibilities which already exist, which already connect and leverage and work with those elements in the outer world, are revealed to you, and that's your inner gold mine. It's within you. The gold mine is within you. If you look at what the outcome is as a result of combining those elements, those resources, and the relationships, and the different aspects that exist here already with certain innovative outputs, such as we discussed this in the entrepreneurship space, solving a problem, a creative solution to what already exists. When you realize that this is what we were doing, and this is what we're continuously doing, we can work with both the synthetic and the creative imagination, because somebody's synthetic imagination can provide you stimulus for your own creative imagination, because we are inspired by others. And as we continue this journey, we find more innovative ways to be able to work with these outer world elements. And then you recognize this concept of infinite intelligence, which we've discussed before and will probably discuss again because I believe it's important, which I learned from Think and Grow Rich. And so this infinite riches is within us. It's already there. And it is found based on how we think, how we interpret, and how we understand the degree of this outer world being a reflection of the inner world. And what I mean by that is, if you look at whatever has been expressed artistically, creatively, innovatively. It found its origins in the mind of an individual or a group of individuals. When a person reads a book like Magic of Thinking Big, for example, we're taught to dream big and to think big, desire big. What is it that you really want? What is it that you would really like to achieve if you knew that failure or the possibility of it not existing as far as your ability to bring it forth was not part of the equation of thinking? Rather, you were so affirmative that you were able to bring it forth. You could imagine whatever you want. What would that be? And the degree that we are able to do that is the degree that we'll be able to access these understandings within ourselves. However, we are in different stages of the journey. If I look back at my experience, I realize that I'm continuously on this journey and continuously identifying and releasing from these inner resistance, or I like to call these creative blocks, in context to our discussion now. And it's a joyous journey. We've talked about this in the last video. Why see this inner work as stress-based? See it more as unraveling, similar to opening up a gift. The gift is you, and the gift is your imagination and the experiences that are brought forth as a result of conscious use of our imagination. So what we're looking to do is be more one with our experience and to be more conscious with our experience. You could say connecting the five sensory world with the sixth sense. Sixth sense being related to imagination or intuition or vision, the ability to see what already exists, and the five sensory world being an expression of that. If we look around, we'll say all of this that we see was once sourced in the mind and has been expressed. So we can then re-express, or we can innovate creatively and take it a step further, bring forth innovation or ideas that we never seen anyone do before. We have the ability to do any of these combinations within ourselves. This is possible, and this is something that is not new to you. However, it's something that is worth hearing again. You know, I always say this, how do we really rearrange a mind to the point where it remains that way? Someone's identity, let's say, which is reflective of a vision. We've been discussing this. How does a person become so congruent with that identity? You know, like for example, if you see yourself at the end, at that end, you think a certain way, you act a certain way, you relate with others a certain way, and you have certain experiences at that end. All of that is a result of that self-image that you are embodying the moment you commit to it. And how does one continue this journey of embodiment to that vision in an unwavering, lighthearted way? Well, we do this through affirmation of certain information, be it information that you listen to in audios, read in books, communications that you have with people, and your environments, which are a source of information related to that vision, or that same information from different perspectives. For example, say your goal is to be able to innovate ways of articulating a concept. This is something that is very fascinating for me. You want to innovate the world of teaching because you found some areas that the world of teaching can evolve in. And you know that you're the one to do it. How do you continue to encourage that particular way of thinking? Well, perhaps you would read a book on innovative ways of teaching. And then beyond that, you also ask the question, what are other sources of information that are related to those key, powerfully innovative ways of teaching? And who else has been working with those concepts and can discuss and share with me their own experiences based on them working with those concepts? So simply put, repetition of the same information or repetition of the same information from different perspectives. What happens then is the mind becomes one with the vision and with our reality, with the five sensory experience, where we feel more one with, in harmony with, a deeper level of emotional integration between where we are, where we want to be, and the journey. Now, it's not to say that you wouldn't have moments where you would be emotionally thrown off. Nothing wrong with that. But rather, you'll find that one of the keys to high levels of creativity or innovative thinking is feeling at ease and being well connected with your experiences each day. So the start of your day, and I've talked about this before, the morning routine is done in a certain way. I'll put a link in the description where I discuss that. Where you step into your flow, you get into your flow, and you maintain your flow. And then your workday is set up a certain way. And while there are challenges, you also find yourself coming up with interesting ideas, creative ways of looking at what we would call problems and turning them into solutions, and even maybe coming up with innovative ways that you turn a problem into a solution in which that becomes a product or service or something that you can share in your relationship with other entrepreneurs, other leaders, and so forth. But you're enjoying this. And you're finding more joy in this day-to-day way of being. And at the end of the day, you do what you love to do. You enjoy the different things that you do, the people that you're connected with. You discuss and you share your experiences, and it becomes a very flow-based way of living. When you reflect back at the end of the day, you'll be able to look at what does Wu Wei mean, and you will say, oh, that's where I was experiencing it. I was very flow-based, I was autotelic, I was one with what I was doing, and it seemed effortless. Although I might have been doing a lot of things, and if I look back at my day, I'd accomplished so much. A lot of things were moving. So I've got some quotes here from the book that we discussed, part of the book that we discussed last Thursday, the Master Key System. Let's look at this. The infinite life flows through you, is you. Its doors are but the faculties which compromise your consciousness. To keep open these doors is the secret of power. Is it not worthwhile to make the effort? The great fact is that the source of all life and all power is from within. Persons, circumstance, and events may suggest need and opportunities, but the insight, strength, and power to answer these needs will be found within. It's all found within ourselves, and it is found, as we've been discussing it, when we get into and maintain our ideal state of mind. And the output is a lot higher. The progress is a lot higher. The yield is a lot higher. However, the effort is more about keeping the mind in a state of creative flow. Now, some of the things that a person might have on this journey, Napoleon Hill shared in Think and Grow Rich. It's called the 6 basic fears: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love or someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. So we've been discussing it's not these things, but the interpretations, the meaning that we are giving to these elements brings forth a reactivity. So where did this identification of reactivity in relation to these elements, which we would call fear, show up? Well, based on past experiences. However, what we can do is work on these areas so we feel less of it in the areas where they are not relevant. Because as we do it, we find ourselves easily able to maintain that state of mind where we have that creative flow. Such as, for example, fear of poverty. I've spoken to many entrepreneurs and artists who find it stressful to express because they don't have certain financial resources. However, when we recognize that one of our goals is to be able to see the resources around us that we could leverage, We find creative ways to ascend past that circumstance. Many of us started on this journey with very little resources. And as a result of working with the, you could say, limited resources that were available in the outer world via the connecting of the infinite resources that were available within, we were able to turn those limited resources into abundant opportunities and yield on those opportunities, thus bringing forth even more resources, such as money and other kinds of resources that could be further leveraged into further business growth, such as when you build a business, you have many different assets, digital assets, physical assets, real estate assets, and all of these can be further leveraged into further business opportunities and growth and so forth, either through the individual's business or through partnership with other businesses. This is something that we talked about in Jay Abraham's book, Mr. X, Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got, which was his other book. We also talked about that. I'll put a link in the description to those two videos. Second would be fear of criticism. That usually spawns from criticism that we've experienced in childhood, in which we attempted to do something and somebody gave us some kind of shame-based way of looking at it. It seemed to throttle us from expressing. Then we begin to understand what was going on within ourselves and change it, change how we relate to it. Now all of a sudden, we feel less identified with reactivity if we were to receive something that on the surface looks like a criticism. And that's because we have a greater degree of discernment. When you put something out there, when you express, as you continue on this journey, you're very confident in what you express and how you express. And this confidence increases. And thus you have less fear of criticism because you know the validity, because what you say and how you say it, you know where it leads, even if another person might not know why you were saying what you were saying or expressing what you were expressing. It led to an end. You saw it. It was clear to you, so you understand more. Now, as we go down this inner journey, we will find, via the journey within, accurate interpretation of how to interpret these elements. One of the things that happens to bring forth a higher degree of creativity, ways of thinking that look at these attributes in ways that perhaps other people don't see it right now. Maybe you'll be the only one that thinks a certain way regarding fear of poverty or fear of criticism. But that way of thinking will open up creativity, or as we say, the floodgates of abundance as a result of it. And the same is to be said about, for example, in the entrepreneurial journey or the business world. We call this risk tolerance. Someone who has a higher degree of risk tolerance will take a higher degree of calculated risk when it comes to their money because they have less identification of fear of poverty. And when they make that investment and they get the return and they continue on this pathway and they accelerate in their wealth, others might look at them and say, how did you do it? And they'll give them the process or the investments that they've made and the strategy. And the other person might look at that and say, well, I might not be able to do that because that sounds very scary. Well, the question then becomes, does the person want to do that? Because if they wanted to do that, they would identify where they're having this fear of poverty, where these interpretations, the source of it, and change them. Wu Wei, what I found, is a harmony between accurate thinking and intuitive understanding. Intuitive understanding, you know, there's a knowingness. Accurate thinking is if you want to be able to reflect back on what you know. So accurate thinking can stimulate the intuition because if a conversation like this is revealing some attributes within you and say, what he's saying here, if I look back at my experience, it seems to be helpful. I feel more at peace now. Then what you'll find is that you'll connect back through this intuitive understanding, and then the creativity will flow in whatever it is that you're looking to express it in, the creative expression. And the same is to be said about maintaining this intuitive connection As you maintain the intuitive connection, the thinking becomes, you could say, more minimal, or the right amount of thinking. That's a ratio. And that ratio is not something we have to think about. That ratio is something, as we've been discussing, is found when you maintain your flow, the ideal state of mind. Now, when it comes to resources, we want to look at the resources from the state of mind which is related to the vision. So Charles Haanel says, direct your effort to a realization of the mental resources, always at your command, from which all real and lasting power comes. If you look at all the resources that you have available and you feel overwhelmed by potentialities, then it's safe to assume that you are not in the ideal state of mind, because then when you get into the ideal state of mind and you see the opportunities and the resources, you will feel inspired and you will see the connections. So we work with the mental resources first, and then as a result of working with the mental resources, we're better equipped to deal with the physical resources. He says, persist in this practice until you come to a realization of the fact that there can be no failure in the accomplishment of any proper object in life, if you but understand your power and persist in your object, because the mind forces are ever ready to lend themselves to a purposeful will, in the effort to crystallize thought and desire into actions, events, and conditions. So the rearrangement of the mind is reflected as the rearrangement of reality, the way you behave, the way you communicate, the way you integrate, where your attention goes, and how you interpret the different aspects on the journey to the point of inspiration where you feel inspired. Now, all of this is still happening from within, all of it. And all of it is a result of a certain state of mind. So that's why I recommend watching that video I did on Change Your State, Change Your Life. If you look at personal development books, trainings, seminars, audios, one of the things that you will find as you evaluate this is that as you consume that information, as it resonates with you, it brings you into a certain state of mind. And then when it brings you into that state of mind, you begin to see the opportunities, even if it's just for a period of time. But the key, and we've been discussing this over the videos, is to maintain that so it becomes who you are, as I had suggested and now experienced when I went back to 2017 and discovered that that's where I was the most effective, productive, joyous, flow-based, creative, was when I was in the flow. I made a commitment to identify what are all those things that brought me into it. What are all the things that maintained it? And also, what are the things that I refer to as flow breakers? That's why we look at environment, another important element. When it comes to environment, I want to share a key distinction. And Charles Haanel says it really well. He says, matter is powerless, passive, inert. Mind is force, energy, power. Mind shapes and controls matter. Every form which matter takes is but the expression of some pre-existing thought. Now, we can work with this in two ways. So you can change how you relate to any environment and really embody subconsciously the way of thinking, those beliefs, those assumptions, the interpretations to that environment, and you will feel more flow in those environments. Or you can pick the environments that stimulate your flow. It's still based on the interpretations from within. Now, this one is important to reflect upon because the environments, usually when we speak with creative professionals, entrepreneurs, performing artists, one of the things that they indicate is that when they travel or they go to certain environments, that's when they get their creative inspiration. And so they know which environments to go to, or some of them we help identify what are these environments, and then they are able to recognize that those are the environments that they need to go to. And then when they go to those environments, they get back into their creative flow. Just go to the environments that bring out your flow. Find those environments. That's part of the things that I did on my journey. I identified what the environments were. down to where I would find that I would get my highest degree of flow. For example, Vienna, Austria, Playa del Carmen, Mexico, Los Angeles, in certain cities, I would find myself in flow very easily. And then in certain environments, it wasn't the case. Now, I took what I'm suggesting here and I put it into practice. I said, some of these environments, they're not a flow-based environment. It's what I would call a flow breaker environment. But can I change how I relate to this environment? And I found it. Such was the case this last year and a half when so much of the world was in quarantine. There were certain environments where I wouldn't normally find that to be a flow-based environment, but I was able to find flow in it. So ideal environments play a big role. How we relate to the environments and the environments that, based on past interpretations or whatever interpretations within, stimulate that flow. That's what we want. We also want to recognize that the resources are abundant, and we'll be able to work with those resources when we first recognize the importance of the most abundant resource that we have available, which is the mind. As Charles Haanel stated, direct your effort to a realization of the mental resources. So recognize that if, for whatever the reason may be, you don't have your creativity, there's a few ways of doing this. I'll share that in my video where I discuss change your state, change your life. What I then do is further encourage it by expressing that creativity, engaging in the activity, so I can maintain that state of mind for longer. So as we've been discussing, the reason why we do that is so that it becomes a natural way of being. That state of mind, which is reflective of the vision, becomes the identity. To pave this pathway back to the inner infinite intelligence, as Charles Haanel states, we pave the internal pathway. If you want a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.